Many of you know that for much of my adult life, I spent it serving in the South Bronx and in Harlem in New York City, where the Friars, where we lived, we were surrounded by a tremendous amount of food insecurity, hunger, people who were struggling not only with homelessness, but struggling with just living without enough to support their family. And that became especially acute around the time of Thanksgiving or around Christmas time or the major holidays. I think of Thanksgiving in particular because it's that, it starts to get cold in New York City and the electric bills go up and everyone burns oil there, the oil bills go up and everything becomes more expensive, and Christmas is right around the corner, and I think it's just a really difficult time for a lot of people. I imagine it is also here, but there it was just so evident, especially to us and to our work and our ministry. And it's actually one of the things that I miss, not the need, but the wonder that the way that God provided for so many people's needs, especially around the time of Thanksgiving. We were there in the South Bronx, and out of the generosity of so many people like yourselves, we would gather in from stores and so on. We would gather hundreds and hundreds of turkeys and hams, more than we could possibly imagine on any normal day giving out, but it would all go. Food enough for plenty. Just like in Jesus' story, the story of Jesus that we hear in John's Gospel today. Fascinating thing about how generous and how wondrous God's amazing love can be. It was, in a way, I would say miraculous. Although, in my story, in my experience in the Bronx, it was the miracle of love that moved you all, people like you. But in Jesus' story, he had 5 barley loaves and 2 fish and at least 5,000 people to feed. And somehow, by God's superabundance and generosity, it was more than enough, overflowing more than enough. I was thinking about the disciples who were there with Jesus. I don't know if you've ever hosted a dinner party for, say, 10 people. That's a lot of work, hosting a dinner party for 10 people. Hosting a party for 1,000 people is a tremendous amount of work. Hosting a party for 5,000 people, even if you only have 2 menu items, fish and barley loaves of bread, it must have been for the 12 people who were there with Jesus. He's like, okay, now give them this. It must have been a tremendous amount of work. I can tell you in the Bronx, in my experience there, it was slinging turkeys for hundreds of people on a morning, when people are lining up at dark 30 is a lot of work. It reminds me also, or at least I see it also happening here in our midst at the Haitian Project, which has been happening just in our parish hall for these last few weeks, almost miraculously. Piles and piles and piles of things have shown up in our parish hall, and a lot of people have been putting a lot of work there, I would say. I don't know if you've been over there. Today is half price day. I know the Haitian Project this garage sale has a lot of acclaim. I think many of our parishioners are over there working because it was open at 9 o'clock, so they came to other masses and are over there working now. But it's a pretty remarkable thing. They have sections for everything. And if you go in there, it's almost like a department store, where you can ask for a particular thing and they'll direct you to if you need makeup or a hair dryer, or if you need a new kitchen sink or whatever you need. It's all for sale here, and it's pretty remarkable. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that goes into it. One of the things that I think is worth paying attention to, though, is that I learned in the Bronx, in my experience there, is that you could get overwhelmed by the work and forget to allow yourself to be introspective or reflective and to experience the reality, the amazement of what's happening. A sad thing, I think, in what's happening at the Haitian Project, what I find sad is that we're not directly connected with the people who are benefiting from it. Surely people are buying and selling and buying things at a reduced price. A lot of people undoubtedly come here and benefit from it directly. But I mean those kids in Haiti who live in a place where they don't have a government that's able to provide an education for them. Or they don't have families or the resources of churches like we have here providing a Catholic school at the Madeleine. They don't have those things that are just abundantly available to them. There's a deep need. And somebody told me recently that it was an insight that things won't change in Haiti, because Haiti's been in the news. I'm sure you've heard of it in the last year or so. It's always in the news, I think. But it won't change until those children receive an education, until everybody has the resources to be able to build a better society. Somehow, in a small way, but in a very real way, the manifest stuff in the parish hall and all the labor of love and all of the work and the buying and selling and stuff that's going on there goes to provide for a very deep need in the lives of these children who are in a place far away, who don't have the resources of their own, who are hungering and thirsting for education. And so I'm very grateful for the work that's happening at the Haitian Project today. Very much it seems to tie in with John's gospel that's been offered to us as a church to reflect on. But I'd like to propose one other element to this, that God's superabundant love that became evident miraculously in the multiplication of the loaves and the fishes that fed the 5,000 and the amazement that happened. So they were so amazed they wanted to make him king, and he had to sort of hide out. That's very different from our political leaders nowadays, I think, Anyway, he hid out because he didn't want to become king. Different from that, or more than that, even more than what's happening here at the Haitian Project and the school that we're providing for down in Haiti and the education that's happening to the kids, for the kids, more than that, God wants to give to us. In fact, I think he wants to prepare through these things a way for something even more deeply necessary in our hearts. John, in his telling of this story, he reminds us that this was set in the season of Passover. Passover, if you remember, was that time where the Jewish people in their liturgical and their religious life, they celebrated the memory and experienced anew the reality of God who freed them from slavery in Egypt. Through their own poor choices, the Hebrew people that became the Israelite people, they found themselves in slavery, and God worked to free them. He did that through a number of different ways, but one way that they remembered it and one way that they experienced it was through the sacrifice of the Passover lamb, the sacrifice and the meal that made up the highest of their liturgical celebrations. Well, Jesus also wants to free us. And we remember this every week, and we celebrate it in particular at Easter, but we remember it every Sunday here in our sacrifice of the Paschal Lamb, and in the meal that we celebrate together. The freedom that he wants to bring to us is not necessarily freedom even from poverty, but he wants to bring to us a freedom from our slavery to sin and to death. Things that drive us, forces that seem to own us, fears that occupy and cripple us from time to time. To be free from those things. This is the gift that he wants to give to us, but he prepares the way through these other things because he wants us to understand just the immensity of the generosity of God's love. He has a power to do all things, and he wants to do them for our benefit. As we remember and witness and appreciate and hopefully experience a little bit of the amazement of the Haitian Project or the other ways that God is super abundant in his generosity to us, perhaps also it will open our hearts, if we allow it, to receive the gift that God really wants to give to us, the gift he gives us in the Eucharistic celebration today, that gift of his own divine grace that sets us free, free to love, free to cherish, free to appreciate and care for the world around us in ways that we would not have done when we were caught in our own selfishness. Let us ask for that freedom again today as we enter into a new Eucharistic amazement.